I'm making an Italian classic and one of my favorites, a lasagna with meat sauce. Now, I don't know about you, but I like my lasagna ooey and gooey. So we're gonna use fresh mozzarella, ricotta cheese. We're gonna make our own meat sauce. But what we're not gonna do is boil a noodle. This is a no noodle boil recipe. But before we get started, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button for me. Like most lasagnas, we're gonna layer meat sauce, cheese, and noodle. So the first step, we need to make our meat sauce. So in a large pot over medium-high heat, we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of olive oil and saute 1 cup of chopped carrots and 1 cup of chopped onions. We're gonna saute our carrots and onions for about 8 to 10 minutes until they get tender, until the onions get translucent. All right, onions and carrots are good. Let's add in our 3 cloves of minced garlic. And we're gonna saute the garlic for about a minute, that's it. We're ready for our meat. I've got 1 pound of lean ground beef. We're gonna cook our meat until it is all brown and no more pink is visible. Our ground beef is browned. Let's add some crushed tomatoes, all right? We're adding 2 cups of crushed tomatoes. I get crushed tomatoes with basil, just to add a little more flavor. I'm also gonna turn my heat down to low. Get this mixed in really well together. Up next, we have 12 ounces of tomato paste. Stir it all up. Okay, let's add in half a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of dried basil, half a teaspoon of sugar. Got to sweeten it up a bit. 1 teaspoon of salt, and a half teaspoon of pepper. Get all of these spices and the sugar blended in. So our meat sauce just needs to sit here and simmer on the stove for about 25 minutes, covered. All right, meat sauce is finished. Time to build our lasagna. I've got a 9x13 baking dish. I sprayed it down and got it greased really well. First step, we're gonna take 1/3 of our meat sauce and put it on the bottom of our baking dish. All right, spread it around really well. This is our base layer of the lasagna. All right, so after the first layer of meat, we're gonna layer on our dry lasagna noodles. On top of our lasagna noodle, we're gonna put half of our ricotta cheese. Now the ricotta cheese layer is not gonna be very thick. On top of the ricotta, we're gonna use half of our fresh mozzarella that we've sliced up. All right, that's layer 1. Let's repeat. Let's get another 1/3 of our meat sauce. Put it on top of our mozzarella. Remember, on top of the meat, we put our dry lasagna noodles. And on top of our dry lasagna noodles, we put our ricotta cheese. So this should be the last half of your ricotta cheese. Now we put our last half of mozzarella on top of our ricotta cheese. Now we layer on our final 1/3 of meat sauce. This is gonna be our top layer. The last thing that goes on our lasagna, we have half a cup of shredded Parmesan cheese. So since our noodles aren't cooked, we're gonna put a half a cup of hot water around the edges here. Last thing we're gonna do is cover our lasagna tightly with some aluminum foil. All right, my oven is preheated to 375. We're gonna bake our lasagna covered with the foil for 45 minutes. Then we're gonna take the foil off and continue baking for 10 more minutes, all right? And that's it for the lasagna meat sauce. Last thing we got to do is give it a taste test. I would let it sit out for 10 to 15 minutes before you go cutting into it. Now remember, I like my lasagna ooey and gooey. Let's see if we got an ooey and gooey lasagna. Well, success. We have ooey and gooey. I think you guys are going to love this. That is officially a wrap on my lasagna with meat sauce. Let's give it a taste. So if you guys like the recipe, give me a thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button over here. I'm going to add the lasagna with meat sauce to my comfort food playlist. I bet you'll find some other recipes you're going to like. Check it out. I'll see you guys next time.